Yeah, hey, it's Javier. Um, I've been hanging out, you know, attempting to move forward. I'm in my late 20s now. I'm 28. Uh, but it was in September, late September. It's the 25th. Um, so this year was mostly cool, um, but it's also been pretty rough. So approximately a year ago, I was hired on to work here in Seattle, um, with the Low Income Housing Institute, uh, housing uh, leaseless people. Um, so low income type of deal. Um, and I was living in Del Rio, Texas when I put in the application. Then January 17th, I arrived in Seattle by bus. I lived in a hotel for maybe till May. I think it was May like 10th, probably when I received the keys to this apartment here. Put in my laptop to this apartment here. I'm currently facing eviction because uh, the management team, they don't seem to be very supportive or friendly. When I was hired on originally, I had applied for a full-time job, shift 3 overnight. So midnight to 8 a.m. That's what I applied for. But they chose another candidate instead for that position. We had both applied, and it turned out that um, he had received his interview the day prior, and he was hired then. So um, when I did the interview the next day, and uh, I, I passed the interview. Um, but as the position had already been taken, I suppose they failed to recognize that there was another facility that had the same shift open. Um, they didn't really let me know about it, but apparently it had been open. And they instead gave me a part-time job. So I was working 48 hours a week, or yeah, 48 hours a week. I was working two 12-hour shifts. I guess it's 48 hours every couple of weeks, actually. Yeah, that's what it was. 48 hours every couple of weeks. It started Friday 8 a.m. Friday 8 p.m. to Saturday 8 a.m. Then again the next day. I did okay for a bit. But it was pretty expensive, paying for a hotel to live in a hotel until May. Um, so I guess at some point I mentioned it to my manager and let him know that I needed more hours or I wouldn't be able to stay or something like that was brought up. We brought it up in conversation. So I was given an opportunity to work overtime, and so I was working an average of 120. I think that the max was 127. Um, the lowest was maybe 117 every couple of weeks. But I was working every day. I was working the those 12-hour shifts over the weekend, and I was working 8-hour shifts overnight from that same shift at the other location where the where the job was available. So I was doing pretty okay at that time. I was doing Aikido, which I did for 6 weeks. Um, and that was a lot of fun. Uh, I, I was received by a sensei there. Um, I asked if he would mentor me, and he agreed. But I was soon, um, but by that point, it was time that I got my own apartment. So I had just paid. I'd just been ready to pay, or I'd just paid for this spot. Um, so I was out of funds to pay for uh, the year subscription for the dojo. Um, it's called Tenzan Aikido. Um, the yearly subscription came with a free gi. I could have purchased the 6 month subscription, but I was really going for the gi because I had another dobok from when I was taking Taekwondo in Del Rio. But I like the idea of having two gis. I like the idea of having a new gi, and I like the idea of having a gi that didn't say Taekwondo, um, as I personally consider it too aggressive to be my own personal style. I am interested in Taekwondo for hardcore purposes, but I'm a little more reserved. Pardon. So my styles, Aikido, and I also show much interest in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Uh, I've been interested in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for, at that point, maybe 6 to 8, maybe 9 months. I've been interested in it. Um, but so I, so I'm returning to the old financial epidemic. Yeah, um, for some reason I was, or yeah, I'll say it's some reason, because to be honest, I'm not actually completely sure what the reasoning was. It was kind of very abrupt. They gave me a reason, and I'll explain that in a bit. But I was taken from those overtime hours, 120 on average, uh, 123, 125, or whatever, and I was dropped completely from the shift 3 overnight. So I was taken completely to part time once again. Um, and that was immediately as soon as I'd paid for the apartment. So it seemed kind of intentional. Um, they'd set me up with, so there was a program where I could, through the company, um, be set up with another apartment that would take approximately 30 to 60% of my rent, or excuse me, 30 to 60% of my paycheck to pay for rent, and that would be the rent, regardless of what the paycheck looked like. But once I got those overtime hours, I was I was making too much money to be eligible for that program, so I had to attain my own. apartment on my own, the normal way. Um, so soon after that, as soon as I been fired from that other position, I started looking for a part-time job, and I did, and I was hired on to Safeway. I was hired on as a produce clerk, but during the second week of training, they decided to stop training me. They said, "I don't think I can train you," and so I quit that. Um, and I was left without that supplemental income. So I was making maybe $680 to $720 every couple of weeks, and the rent was approximately 1375 or 1390, including utilities. So the rent, it just kept piling up. Um, I applied for the other job, uh, the one that the shift three position, the one that I'd been fired from, so that I could return to that establishment um, and get just like full time hours of what, like 80 to 89 or 86 or whatever, 88 hours per paycheck, or yeah, just something like that, or something like that. And that manager that had been hired to manage the facility in which I was contractually signed on for, uh, claimed that he believed that I wasn't ready, so he shot me down. He shot down the application. Yeah, that's what his claim was. And I talked to some of the other higher management uh, staff. They said he didn't have the power to do that, so I was really confused. Um, but so I did have a conversation with them, and they suggested that I apply again, and maybe 3 weeks later, the transfer went through. So I picked up again. It had been maybe 4 paychecks. There may be 4 paychecks between those, between that entire timeline, part of the timeline. So the rent had already become something. I was doing okay in regards to the Luciferian doctrine. At that time, I was doing pretty all right. I was eating very well. I was thin, as you could probably tell from my Luciferian doctrine first video that I put up. But as you can see, I have fallen off, um, which happened uh, uh, maybe the middle of June. Towards the end of June, maybe even something like this, 27th. I believe the 27th was when I had gone to a psych ward, because I was just experiencing so much stress for something like 4 weeks, for like an entire month. For about 2 or 3 weeks, I was maybe 2.5 weeks. I was still pretty focused. I was doing well. Um, but after the reduced paycheck started hitting, and then the second firing, the firing from Safeway, um, things just started to become a little bit more difficult. I had so much free time on my hands that I didn't really know what to do with it. Um, my studying habits went down. My oral health, my my hygiene was actually pretty still okay. I would suppose it wasn't all that bad, but I stopped brushing my teeth like 3 to 5 times a day, like I had been for since maybe February, late January, early February. And I was doing that daily, showering twice a day, in the morning and then at night, just to make sure that all my sheets were clean the whole time. So yeah, that lasted a good healthy bit. But I did end up falling off, and so part of the so like as soon as I had started to lose that focus, like those 3 weeks in, I started experiencing like a week of just a lot of self detriment. Um, it was mostly psychological, but I had begun to very slowly eat astringent from the diet plan, astringently from the diet plan. And then by the 27th, I it had been maybe 3 or 4 days. It was probably 4 days where I started eating mixed foods again. Um, and the day that I'd called the hospital, I basically had like a tub of maybe half a pound, 3/4 of a pound of some garbanzo, Turkish garbanzo salad from PCC. Um, and then I added a bunch of macadamia nuts. Those are like my favorite, by the way. Um, and then like a can or two of beans, and then I added some salt, and I don't know, it was just some weird concoction. But I just couldn't handle it anymore, and I was just spazzing out very, very horrifically. So I called 911, and I was like, I can't control myself. I don't have the inhibition anymore. I'm no longer my actual self, and I was no longer my honest me. Um, it was still completely organic, but it was just mixed foods. And anyways, as soon as I got to the hospital, I stayed there overnight. It was like maybe 14 hours. Um, I had some sort of veggie burger, and it was like the worst thing ever because it was not organic. It was just it tasted like water in a burger. Not exactly the best thing to to um, to experience on a palate. Luckily, though, they did have what was it like tomato soup, and like fingerling broccoli, potatoes, fingerling potatoes. Those were okay, but I just like my stomach. I was for some reason I was just always wanting to continue eating, and I didn't really have any friends to support me at that time. People kind of just like brushed me to the side. Um, so I'd then gone to a psych facility, Um, I stayed there for maybe somewhere between 2 and 3 weeks. And then they discharged me, and the stuff that they wrote on the papers were all weird, and it was just, they were mistruths. And then I got back, and I think for about 3 days, I was still not so okay. And then it started kicking in again. I was starting to do okay, but by that time, or around that time, I started like these voices in my head. All of these people, the consciousness grid, the people, the other entities in the realm would communicate with me, and I was just being told that there was some level of worthless, that I was a level of unworthy, like it says in the book. Just that 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 phrase, those words, they're pretty detrimental to the purpose of what practitioners claim to be about. Um, some other words that popped up were the idea of, if it feels like you no longer have time, then, so I forget the quote, but basically the whole like being kicked out mechanism. And so it's been really tough to try and climb back in. So this was maybe like early July when I was finally out. Then, so I was still, I worked at Friendship Heights was the location that I was working at, the place that I was contractually hired onto initially. I did that for maybe 3 to 5 weeks, maybe 6 weeks or something like that. Um, and then I was hired on to Lakefront Community House, the other location where I would be working shift 3. Um, my work ethic at that point had dropped. Um, I no longer felt like myself. I never felt welcomed anymore. And I had a new coworker that was kind of not very open. And so it was just the two of us working that midnight to 8 a.m. shift. It felt like I had to do most of the work, definitely most of the work, but it felt like I had to do all of the work myself. Um, I'll get into the details of what the work was like maybe in another post, but so here I am now. Um, they fired me from Lakefront by the end of October, maybe like the 22nd. Um, so the upper management staff, the people just above, or the person and or people just above the on-site manager for Lakefront, was, I think it started with a meeting that I was supposed to go to, but I didn't receive the text until maybe 1 hour before the meeting, if I remember that correctly. Um, but my phone was, it didn't have any charge on it. I maybe I don't know. I wasn't expecting it. It was a day off for me. Um, so I guess maybe it started there or something like that. But at some point over time, um, I just felt neglected by the management staff, so I didn't exactly feel welcome. Again, I didn't feel welcome. And then the coworker also, I was working to try to motivate them to perform a level of work and be friends. Actually, it started off with being friends. I was trying to just be nice um, because it was a new person to me. And then after a week or two, um, I be I was just a bit upset. So I that sentence I don't remember what I was going to say. Anyways, I was so upset that at some point I went so far as to go to sleep throughout the entirety of the shift. I did so on purpose just because I felt so shunned by uh, what we will call the employer. And I know that definitely wasn't something that one should ever, so to speak, straight up be okay with doing. I wasn't even okay with doing it, but I was very stressed and very upset. So, so I just walked into another room out of the camera's vision. And then after that, they called a meeting maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks later, and brought that up. And then they started adding other things as well. Um, but none of these other things ever actually happened. Um, well, okay, so they listed maybe 7 to 11 things, and only three of those things happened. Um, during the interview in which we were experiencing conversation about what the process would look like afterwards, um, was basically they listed all of these grievances and said, "You have one more chance. If you mess up again, then we will terminate you." Yeah, they said that to me. And I was okay with it. I was fine. I was like, all right, I get it. I know, I know. But I tried to bring it up to the union representatives, a union and union representative, right? Use a vowel, so an, right? Um, then they started adding other things that were just completely false. They even claimed that I was asleep for like 13 minutes at the desk when I was on the screen. Uh, that is to say, I was not sleeping on screen. Um, and I know for a fact that I wasn't. I checked the cameras, which I later found was a sort of change that the village organizers, which was the position that I was working at, were were not to be on watching cameras, or controlling cameras, playing back cameras, but it was something that I had been already trained to do. Or yeah, I'd been given the knowledge to do so. So I was with the impression that it was okay, and nobody had told me that it wasn't. Um, so on that grievance list of those like 11 um, points that they wanted to make, I made sure to go back and check on all of them to um, to have a level of proof to know for myself whether I had partaken in any of these activities that they claimed, and none of them were actually congruent with true reality. The only thing that could have come close were two points actually. One where they claimed that I was asleep at a case manager's desk near the kitchen in like the manager's lobby. And while I wasn't asleep, I was seated there. I know this because I purposely sat there. I was upset again at my coworker, um, but I was still doing part of my job, um, which was to check for people who were arriving, like the villagers as they were arrived to the facility to check them in and things like that, just to be sure that we kept up with who was present. Um, so I kept up with that. Um, and, and so the other instance where I went into the kitchen area to take like the intention was like a 5 or 10 minute break, just like a quick lunch break. I just needed to cool off for a bit because the situation with the being at the spot and being frustrated quite often. The work wasn't frustrating, but the lack of help was. Um, and it wasn't even so much a lack of help, but the energy that I received from that coworker, he was um, very passive and also very pushy, kind of just like upset and pushed me away a lot. So I went to go sit down in the chair, and I did that, and um, I started to feel like immediately I felt very woozy. Um, so during that interview, I let them know that I did feel woozy and that I perceive myself to lose a level of consciousness. I didn't completely lose consciousness. It was more like just like a zombie kind of experience. But that lasted for 35, maybe 45 minutes max. Um, but then somehow I had like a small surge of energy where I was able to stand up. And as soon as I stood up, I immediately felt absolutely fine again. Strange phenomena, but it was my experience. Um, and then during on the termination sheet, um, they claimed, or no, during the grievance sheet prior to the termination, um, they claimed that I claimed that I had lost consciousness. Um, I guess I can sort of see what they were thinking with that, but to omit a level of uh, would lead a reader to consider that I was asleep. Um, so they gave me the sheet. I put a bunch of notes on it, letting them know, like, go ahead and check the cameras again. There was proof that I was actually working. Um, in most of the other instances, that is a problem. Um, but I mean, I guess at some point it was just their word versus mine, and so they gave me a call. I was terminated. They gave me like a $680 check at the end of it because I'd worked maybe like a week, a little bit less than a week, and that was that. So since October 22nd, I haven't been working. I got the check like November 6th or November 7th, and I was already in debt by that time. They gave me an eviction notice because I had still yet to absolutely catch up due to how much time had passed and without enough pay to pay rent. But yeah, so that's where I'm at now. I'm almost right back to the diet plan. Um, I'm at the very least, very congruent in ensuring that I drink water 15 before and give like an hour, 15 hour 30 after eating. So that's pretty constant. And there are few days, but days nonetheless, where I definitely partake in the actual meal plan, diet plan, one ingredient meals. So I think I'm definitely healing. I'm definitely healing again. But so I've got court coming up so that I can see about the rest of this apartment process to just see what might happen. That's I suppose it's within the cards that I may receive a Section 8 voucher. I don't want to get my hopes up too much, but um, we'll see what happens on the 20th, 22nd of December this month. And from there, we'll see what else happens. Um, but since I had so much time away from the dojo, um, that sensei hasn't called me back. So I think that through the several times that I've called the dojo to speak with him, so I'm pretty sure he's upset with me. I may have lost the mentorship, and I've recently lost both members of my group. Or so it seems. I've been blocked on Twitter by both of them. Um, so I don't really know where I stand right now. but it's where I'm at. And in the adamant nature, we're not backing down from our promises to ourselves. So here I am, nearly a full year later from my move, my return to Seattle. Um, um, a month and a half, a month and 3 weeks to go before it's so 27, right? No, I said 17th. 17th is when I arrived. 27th was when I uh, nearly 3 weeks. Yeah, nearly 3 weeks. A month and 3 weeks. Excuse me. Um, I didn't expect this video to make it this long, but I had a lot of catching up to do. I had a lot to say um, based on what's been going on. I I hope that we can build a better community so that we don't just kick people out just for having a bad time. I'm going to go ahead and end the video on this note. I'll cut down the time some other time in the next insert. It was nice chatting with you all, and I'll see you again soon. It's fair.